Hello, and welcome to the 140th Curmudgeon in the Cellar, at least numbered ones. Whoever thought I'd do 140 of these? Wow. I was guest lecturer at a class at Bradley University in Peoria this week, and before I was talking to the professor and that, and he wondered why I was wearing a seatbelt sitting in my chair to do this, and it's not. I'm going to take it off now because it's literally a pain in my neck. But it's just a sling that I had my, all right, for those that have asked, ghoulish people that you are, I had a partial shoulder repair. That's a medical definition, done arthroscopically. And the worst thing about it so far is I can't drive for another 3 weeks. My brand new car. So anyway, that's what that was. Got a bunch of questions tonight. Of course, I skipped one last week. First off, I want to give you a synopsis. This is something. This is why I do this, and why I'm so glad I did do this, and why I'm so glad I got involved in this. I don't know, half dozen, 8 times a year, somebody writes me a letter like this, telling me how positive the influence it was on their lives, how it gave them an escape from bad parents, bad home situation, whatever, and thanking me for what I did then. And I feel thanks are not necessarily very appropriate, but I always tell them they're welcome, and I'm certainly glad we did that. And it's nice to know that something I was involved with has had a positive effect for so many people. Okay, let's start off with, okay. In response to the individual who wanted to know how I would name that gnome, this individual said the name for that gnome should be Mistake. I can't argue with that. Next up, what villains do you prefer? Do they become recurring villains? Well, I can't say I really have any that I prefer. I wrote a 3-piece arc on the Snake Riders of the Aerodonto. Now, they haven't all been published yet, but there was a recurring bad guy in this race of fae that I invented that were tropical, equatorial fae that had gone bad. And they wove in and out of the storyline on all 3. I have never just had a go-to bad guy. I just never have. Oh, I need something to get in their way here. Okay, what's my favorite? I've never had a favorite like that. I tried when I'm designing and when I'm running a game, I try to be as far out of the box as I can and still be recognizable. When I run Wheel of Blame at conventions, I disguise. I don't change anything serious, but they might be stronger than normal or weaker than normal, or have an interesting capability in that instance. I've never fallen into the lazy habit of having, orcs or goblins or gnomes or dwarves, or, and I don't have a go-to monster. As far as villains, Well, I like to think it's usually a wizard that's lost his mind and made deals with entities he can no longer control, whatever. In that regard, yeah, wizards are my go-to villains because they get deranged and unhuman. Um, I could see why an evil cleric would heal a good party member. After all, what a great way to convert someone to their god, i.e., see how much Asmodeus cares to heal your wounds. He believes in you and your sword arm. Well, okay, I can't argue the situation does lend itself that way. However, I wouldn't have that situation. I don't have evil party members in good parties. Um, I usually don't have evil NPCs intermingling with good parties or neutral parties. Um, when I say good, I also mean neutral. It's just not evil. I don't, if you're going to be true to your alignment in that, you don't tolerate evil. And if you're going to be playing paladins and monks and stuff, you can't have evil characters there because they should have a natural antipathy. That's just, it wouldn't come up that way in mine much unless it was an extraordinary event performed by an NPC as an attempt to woo or sway somebody. Um, what's a good way to separate characters from their gold without making them feel cheated? Inflation. Think about it. Okay, they've set up. If you're campaigning, chances are you should have the characters, the players, should have set up a base of operations, an inn where they can keep a trusted inn where they can keep their stuff while they're out adventuring, where they can come back and heal up, et cetera, where they're known, where they're not worried about people sticking a shiv in their ribs. At least that was always our premise. You always had a base somewhere. And this base is a little quiet town of whatever size you choose, and it has an economy of a certain level. And then adventurers come in flush with coin. Now there's coin everywhere. And now inflation rears its ugly head. If you understand the concept of M, all the money in circulation at a given time, and I didn't until a few years ago, so don't feel bad if you don't. When there's 100 pieces of currency floating in a total economy, one piece buys a lot, and fractions of that piece can be used. When there's 1,000 units of currency floating in the economy, now they don't buy so much. The price has gone up because there's more currency circulating. So when they come in with their loot, whether it's, 2-pack meals full of silver coins or whatever, and start spending it or banking it or whatever, inflate it. That room that was costing, a silver a week, now 3. Because money, the currency, the unit of currency, does not have the same value anymore. Meals go up, repairs go up, healing goes up, cures goes up. Getting together with the local cleric and picking up a few cure light wounds gets more expensive. And pretty soon, that big fat pot of money they were sitting on is gone, and they got to go adventure again. Prices go up on everything. That's the effect of inflation. You go into an area that has very little hard currency floating around, and you start dropping hard currency around everywhere. Have inflation. Easiest way to separate them there is. Everything becomes more expensive. Horses used to be 50 gold, now they're 80. appropriate and accurate. So it's not like you made something up to screw them out of their money. It's inflation. Do magic hammers help in the smithing of magic swords? I don't know. I guess we'd have to ask a dwarf or somebody that makes magic swords. Now, I'm just being facetious, granted. Certainly, you could make an argument for that. But if you're taking this along the line of, oh, I've got a magic hammer now, can I make magic swords? No, 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 I'm not going there. That's entirely up to your DM. Crafting your own magic and stuff is entirely within the purview of your DM. If they want to let you do it, fine. For those of you who are DMs, make it take a long time until they become proficient at it. If your magic user is going to make his first magic sword, or produce a magic sword, well then it ought to take a long time and a lot of money for the mistakes and failures along the way, and it ought to take a physical toll on the wizard. Age him. But maybe with a magic hammer, you don't age him as much. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I'm not making light of it. Okay. All right. I've thought about your philosophical point on experience being a through line from Bronstein, D&D at all, to Skyrim, etc. The concept of experience is entwined with upgrading, improving, becoming more powerful. The mechanic could be drawn from earlier games such as chess, where pawns may become queens, and checkers, where pieces may become kings. No, but I'll go on. Not to take away from your point at all, the concept of learning through experience is clearly then from the Green Knight in Bronstein. Okay, please understand that the Green Knight is a metaphor I'm using. It was a figure. I could not tell you which figure. Okay, I know that we had lots of painted up knights at Lake Geneva, and that's how we identified them, is by their colors. Obviously, the players were following the logic of real life and heuristic development, although without the further concept of experience points. The Bronstein example is more abstract, which caused me to draw a comparison to chess and checkers. Though to be fair, XP is obviously an abstraction also. Queening may not have been the inspiration to Bronstein, but it's a precedent in gaming, similar to the effects of gaining XP, becoming experienced. Well, yes and no. And it's not my purpose in these videos to argue with people or denigrate their positions, but I'll share mine in that regard. I got to move here a little, get centered back in there. I can't. Yeah, it's hard moving around with this thing all boogered up. Anyway, the checker becomes a king because it fulfills a mission, if you will, get to the other side. It fulfills a requirement. Pawns become queens because they fulfilled a requirement. They got to the other side. There's nothing to do with did they take any other pawns along the way, or did they happen to pick off a snoozing bishop or anything like that. They simply got to the other side. They fulfilled a mechanic of the game. That's my take on it. Very little relationship to with the way experience works now, in my opinion. Got a lot of stuff today. Okay, a good friend of mine who's from Canada. He's talking about how masking goes in Canada, and how he lives in a low density population area of Toronto. So apparently they're all not having any problems whatsoever, keeping socially distant, etc. And good for you. Good for you. Okay, here's one. I use weather because it adds a bit of realism. I mean, there are seasons. Seasons are things. If a campaign begins in the summer, then it's all sunshine. But after a while, fall starts up. Okay, I don't, um, I don't disagree with using weather. Um, when I write adventures, which are, little, this thing happened here at that time, type things, I generally think of weather in terms of how it will affect. Um, now, if I've got them, well, the Arredondo series that I wrote, it's in a tropical, equatorial type climate. Nah, I didn't screw with weather. Too much similarity. But other things, I have written a couple that take place in the frozen north, and so cold and wind and ice and everything certainly can be valuable parts of your campaign. Um, Rain makes bowstrings less accurate, less distance, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think a lot of us use weather as how can we screw with the player characters with it. We can bake them in the sun and they don't have enough water, and so we can start, you know, and that sounds a little bit antagonistic, but if you're going to adhere to paying attention to weather, then I guess it should be. Don't take enough water, you could die. Pretty ignominious death to die of dehydration in the desert rather than being eaten alive by some hideous monster. Um, Certainly, there's plenty of occasions. Um, I have used situations where it's quite windy, which frustrates the archers something fierce. Not so much the slingers. Sling bullets are less affected by gusting winds because of their greater mass density. Anyway, how did the concept of the beholder come about and its inclusion in the game? Well, I'll rat out the individual to whom you can direct all your spleen, and that would be Theron Terry Kuntz, Rob Kuntz's older brother. Rob and Terry were regulars at Gary's table through the conceptualization and the actual formation of the game in that. And Terry came up with the beholder, an eyeball with eyeball stalks. Now, if you're an amateur or a professional shrink, I don't know what you would make out of Terry making a monster out of eyeballs that had special powers. But it, it's certainly one of the great pucker. It has one of the highest pucker factors in all of D&D, probably even greater than my boulet. Of course, if you're outdoors, well, I'm not going to argue. I think, yeah, it probably. I'd get more upset if I saw a beholder than I would a boulet. Um, it's Terry's fault. Blame him. Gary liked it. I'm sure it underwent modification over its evolution and how they arrived at this eye does this power and this eye does that power. And one year at TotalCon, I got sucked into doing some trivia thing, and they asked me what the middle eye or whatever did on Beholder, and I couldn't remember. That's one of the things I would change around. Maybe the really scary power is in one of the eye stalks and not in the central eye. I don't know. But that's Terry's fault. You can blame Terry. Terry's a great guy. I really like Terry. Um, okay. In my humble opinion, if fire-breathing dragons live in a lair where they guard extreme amount of treasure there, the treasure got there with a certain amount of ingenuity and intelligence, enough for the dragon to arrange to carve out and construct an organized waste disposal system, HVAC furnace, caverns, and chambers. That I'll dispute that in a minute. That made me think of plausible, cohesive ideas about how mega dungeons are constructed. Perhaps mining excavations happens with dwarves or deep gnomes commanding and taming giant specialized domestic purple worms to devour rock to make a tunnel, while crapping it out again as fine concrete powder that's smooth. After that, maybe gelatinous cubes or gelatinous blobs are used to do some finishing polishing touches. Now, when I get done with this, then we're going into the responses. They went, a couple of people went a little off the deep end about gelatinous cubes. Never knew they were such popular creatures. All right. Number one, I don't believe, my opinion, that dragons, I don't care if it's an ancient 256-year-old silver, I don't care, pick your color, don't care. I don't think that their wisdom and their intelligence goes into construction techniques, ventilation, whatever. Smart as they might be, crafty and cunning as they might be, they're still creatures. I don't believe that they're going to fashion out an HVAC. I believe that the majority of dragons on a horde, now I'm not talking Smaug with an entire cavern underground filled with gold. Let's take Beowulf, whatever. I don't think that they're going to have anything more than an instinctive love of loot, an extreme territorial urge or instinct. If they're just snoozing away, they don't need to eat a lot or eat often, so less excrement. But I certainly don't think that I don't care if it's an ancient gold dragon that's 256 years old, learned about sanitation. They may know that if there's certain conditions present, it doesn't stink as bad. Or maybe dragons don't smell their own stink. That'd make it a weapon, wouldn't it? If you had to save against retching and the dry heaves, or it'd make you weaker. Huh. Now, we'll go to the gelatinous cubes. Hell yeah. More jobs for gelatinous cubes. Unemployment rates for GCs are woeful. They really should only be considered cube shaped when they're in a dungeon that is 10 wide and 10 tall. I'd rather them be like Jello and be able to shapeshift whenever they need to fit, however they need to fit. And then the topper, perhaps it's racial profiling to call them cubes. Never knew gelatinous cubes were so powerful. They're cubes, the way I understand it, they're cubes because Gary wanted to make something that cleaned up all the detritus after the guys were done hacking and slashing down there. Gary had extensive dungeons, but he reused them. There were areas that were referred to by the players as the orc level, the goblin level. Now, one may necessarily be a single level, but a series of. But he wanted something that would clean it up. Now, on the other side of that coin, Frank Menser did the Lich Super Dungeon, Mega Dungeon, and he went to sanitation crews on schedules. Gary just said, "Now there's these big things down there that just get bigger, and they consume everything and gobble it up." And that's why we'd occasionally go try to set them on fire and see what kind of gems and gold they had inside them. sometimes we had to defeat them because one of them had taken up residence somewhere between where we wanted to go. Is it racist to call them cubes? Well, the point is that if it's a 10 by 10, however, I could call them gelatinous bread loaves because if you don't have a completely square dungeon, perhaps you have a little arc in the ceiling, then they would fill it and look like a loaf of bread. Flat on the sides, flat on the bottom, arched on the top. I don't know. Gelatinous cubes can behave any way they want, any way you want on your world. Racist to call them cubes. Uh, it just takes on some of the more of the silliness of the social justice warriors that have been having conniption fits and tying their balls in knots lately. Um, okay, now we're going to talk about the monks and bards and illusionists. Okay, this is okay. In the original primary overarching classes, fighter, magic user, cleric, and rogue thief, I'd rather just have all magic users optionally cast illusionist spells. I never understood how this subclass, why have this subclass and limit it to humans and gnomes. Well, part of that, when that was being created, that was during the period of the supplements, we were looking for more challenging roles to offer players to play. You know, I mean, in some ways, it proves that there is something worse than being a first level magic user, and that's a first level illusionist, because you can't hurt anybody. You don't even have magic missile. We were looking at casting new characters that people might enjoy playing. We were cashing in on current TV crazes. The monk. Um, another, in, excuse me. Illusionists below 5th level in AD&D are pathetically weak. Yeah, and no, they probably shouldn't be doing things to risk their lives. Pardon me. Another one. In regard to the illusionist class, wanting certain other specialty subclasses, what might call amalgamation class jurors. These low-level magic users are better off played, if ever, in sparring academies where they can't be killed, just injured and repaired. I'll let you in on a little secret. If I was going to start a new campaign tomorrow, I'd tell everybody that I invited a planet to create a 5th or 6th level character with a reasonable backstory to explain how you have what you have. Because I would assume that anybody that made any player character that made it to 5th or 6th level will have picked up some goodies along the way, and I would start there. I wouldn't go down. I don't do that anymore. Now, having said that, I would if I was playing with a bunch of kids. But if I'm playing with a bunch of adults, I wouldn't do that. It's no fun having to roll up new characters all the time. And I don't know what point there would be unless you say, okay, I'm a 5th level and I came out of that academy and I'm wicked fast with my feet and fists. Okay, illusionists shouldn't be magical at all. If you're going to have an illusionist class, be original and make them use stage tricks, chemistry, and mechanical inventions to create illusions. Give the game a nice spurt of steampunk. Charisma and intelligence prime requisite. Dex is very useful. Oh, okay, I guess if you want to do that in your campaign, I'm not against that. DMs, do what you want. All right, that's all the game questions I got. And now I got something that I don't normally go into on this. And I'm going to not single out the individual in question, but I'm going to warn them if they do this again, they'll be blocked from ever watching or commenting or anything. I wear a mask because science tells me that it's the best foil that I have. This individual posted a rant, 2 paragraphs worth on my page, about Dr. Fauci being a phony and the whole thing about this is a phony. And he said he's sad to see an old creative senior game developer buying into something, everything Fauci says hook, line, and sinker. In the face of obvious truth, he's a wishy-washy piece of shit, scamming creep. Blah, 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 blah. All right, number 1, I don't believe that. Number 2, I'm going to wax philosophical here. I had always assumed, wrong, incorrectly, I'm now finding out, that education broadened people's horizons and made them less likely to drink the Kool-Aid. Just blindly follow somebody's line of bullshit. I believe science. I'm not preaching you need to wear a mask or whatever. I'm simply saying I do it. I social distance. We've had social contact other than our immediate family with perhaps 5 people since March. Don't use my comment section to pander your bullshit. I have to wonder how, okay, when I was an election official here in Hamilton County in Ohio, I worked in an area that was fairly affluent. Generally speaking, affluence goes along with education. Managers make more than assembly line workers. And yet these people went overwhelmingly to the Republican side, the dark side. And I continually ask myself, how did that happen? Before I get myself in any more trouble, I'll simply reiterate, don't use my curmudgeon in the cellar for your political crap. Don't put it in the comments or you'll find yourself barred, banned, whatever the term is for YouTube. Don't need to go there. I simply share what I'm doing. There are many, many occasions where I would like to bitch slap some idiot I see out in public who's not practicing good social distancing or wearing a mask. But I don't say anything. But you don't need to drop that shit here. And on that note, on the 140th, I'll say, Tadada Govi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller. Curmudgeon in the cellar.
Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. DSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Tight with tramp under a tree.
High as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.